Before I dive into this heartbreaking story, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Also, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more interesting stories about injustice and prejudice. Emily Johnson, 24, tall and sharp-eyed with chestnut brown hair and warm brown skin, had learned early that life rarely delivered surprises she wanted. But today was different. Standing in her small living room, she clutched her phone, reading a text from an unknown number. Check the driveway. Don't open it until I say. The sunlight filtered through dusty curtains, catching tiny particles that floated like golden sparks in the air. Emily's heart raced. She didn't know who had sent the message, but something deep inside told her that this wasn't a prank. She stepped outside. The air was thick with the smell of summer heat and asphalt. Her eyes fell on something in the driveway. A car sat there, rust creeping along its faded paint, tires slightly sunk into the concrete, its windows clouded and grimy. It looked abandoned, but it felt deliberate, as if someone had left it specifically for her to find. From the porch, a voice cut sharply through the quiet. "He left you an abandoned car?" Emily turned. Martha Collins, her stepmother, stood there. Martha, 45, tall, pale-skinned, with icy blue eyes, always immaculately dressed, had a flair for drama. Her blonde hair gleamed under the afternoon sun, and her perfectly painted lips curled into a mocking smile. "Really, Emily? Are you supposed to, what, take care of this junk?" Martha said, her voice full of condescension. "Honestly, why do you even bother?" Emily's jaw tightened. She had always been able to ignore Martha's barbed comments, but this time, the car held her full attention. There was something in its presence, a quiet significance that she couldn't ignore. Across the street, a neighbor stepped forward. Karen Whitmore, 52, fair-skinned with sharp blue eyes and a reputation for being judgmental. Karen had lived in the neighborhood for decades and had a sharp tongue, often throwing out comments tinged with bias and prejudice. "What is that?" Karen said, her tone sharp. "Some kind of scheme? Honestly, Emily, people like you shouldn't be handling things like this." Emily's heart sank at the words. She had faced similar microaggressions all her life. The subtle assumption that she wasn't capable, the quiet prejudice woven into everyday words. It was familiar and bitter. She clenched her fists. "It's not trash," Emily said, her voice calm but firm. "And it's none of your business." Karen huffed, turned and retreated, muttering under her breath. Emily took a deep breath, focusing back on the car. She could feel something calling her. As she approached, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. She hesitated, then pushed it open. The air inside smelled of mildew and old leather. Dust and grime coated every surface. The glove compartment was stuck. Crumpled papers littered the floor. Then something caught her eye, a faint glimmer beneath the passenger seat. She crouched down and pulled out a small, ornate box. It was heavy, cold under her fingers, and she felt a shiver run through her body. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid. Gold. Bars stacked neatly, glinting even under the dusty sunlight. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Martha gasped, her usual confident demeanor collapsing. "Where? How?" she stammered, her pale face turning nearly white. Emily looked at her stepmother steadily. "I guess the car wasn't as abandoned as we thought." Martha's eyes flickered with greed. She took a hesitant step forward. "We could maybe sell it quietly," she murmured. Nobody would ever know. No, Emily said firmly. I need to know who left it. There's a reason it was hidden, and I intend to find out. Tension hung thick in the air. Martha's jealousy and fear clashed with Emily's determination. The gold wasn't just wealth. It was a test, a puzzle, and perhaps even a trap. Later that evening, Emily retreated to her room. The gold bars were engraved with strange symbols she didn't recognize, etched with precision, almost like a code. Beneath one of the bars, she found a folded note written in elegant, deliberate handwriting. Trust no one. Protect it. This is only the beginning. Emily's heart pounded. Protect it? From who? Her thoughts were interrupted by memories of the neighborhood. Earlier that day, a group of men, white, middle-aged, and known for their casual cruelty, had watched her walk past. Their whispers weren't just idle gossip. They were laced with assumptions, with judgments, with the quiet venom of prejudice. Emily tightened her grip on the gold. The world she lived in was not a safe one. Microaggressions, overt biases, and dismissive stares were her constant companions. Now, with wealth in her hands, those biases could become dangerous. The next morning, Emily returned to the driveway to think clearly. The car was gone. In its place lay a single envelope addressed in the same elegant handwriting. Inside was a small black key and another note. Use this wisely. Time is running out. Emily's pulse quickened. This was no longer a mystery she could ignore. The gold was more than a gift. It was a responsibility. And with it came dangers she could barely imagine. As she walked through her neighborhood that morning, she felt the weight of scrutiny all around her. Neighbors watched her, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled disdain. Emily's dark skin and quiet strength had always made her a target for subtle prejudice. The gold magnified it, turning casual judgment into potential threat. Inside the house, Martha's mind raced. She sat at the kitchen table, her fingers brushing the edge of the ornate box. Greed and fear battled within her. If anyone finds out, we could be rich beyond imagination, she whispered to herself. But Emily mustn't know I'm thinking this. The house felt heavy that evening. Shadows stretched long across the walls, creeping in like silent predators. Emily sat by her window, the black key in her hand, the box of gold beside her. She knew she had entered a new world, a world full of secrets, danger, and hidden threats, both from outside and within her family. Emily reflected on her life, the teachers who doubted her intelligence, the neighbors who whispered assumptions, the casual dismissals because of her skin color. Prejudice had always hovered over her, quiet and constant. Now it was intertwined with the gold, giving the biases power to hurt, to manipulate, or even to steal. But she wouldn't let it. Emily looked at her reflection in the window, her brown eyes fierce and determined. She had faced judgment, discrimination, and quiet cruelty all her life. She'd had survived. And now, with the gold and the black key, she would navigate a labyrinth of greed, secrecy, and bias, protecting what was hers, uncovering the mystery behind it, and standing tall in a world that had never really wanted her to succeed. The abandoned car, the notes, the whispers, and the gold, they were only the beginning. Emily knew that, and she was ready. The morning after the black key appeared, Emily Johnson sat on the edge of her bed, the gold bars stacked carefully beside her. Her brown eyes traced the strange symbols engraved into the metal, symbols that seemed to hum with a silent warning. At 24, she was no stranger to challenge, but the weight of what had fallen into her hands felt almost suffocating. From downstairs came the sound of Martha Collins, her stepmother, moving restlessly. Emily could hear the tap of heels against the floorboards and the soft murmur of her voice, muttering to herself. Martha's pale face had always been a mask of control and judgment. But since discovering the gold, that mask had begun to crack, revealing greed and fear lurking beneath. Emily knew she couldn't trust Martha, not fully. Martha had always been self-serving, willing to manipulate and deceive for advantage. And now, with the gold in play, her ambition could tip into betrayal. Outside, the neighborhood was alive with subtle hostility. As Emily walked down the street to clear her mind, she felt the familiar sting of judgment. A group of men leaned against the fence of a neighboring house. Their eyes followed her, whispers carried in the hot morning air. Look at her. Think she owns the world now. Does she even know what she's doing? The words weren't loud, but the tone was sharp, heavy with bias and unspoken assumptions. Emily had faced similar moments all her life. Teachers doubting her abilities, neighbors assuming she didn't belong. But this time, it was dangerous. This time, the gold made her a target. Her hands clenched the black key in her pocket. Whoever had left the car and the gold had chosen her for a reason, and someone was already watching. Back at home, Martha appeared in the living room, pacing, her hands clasped tightly together. Her pale blue eyes flickered with calculated thought. If anyone finds out, we could be wealthy beyond imagination, she muttered to herself. But Emily cannot know I am thinking of taking a portion. She's too cautious, too careful. She mustn't suspect. Emily felt the tension between them like a physical force. Martha's ambition was a storm, and Emily had to navigate it carefully. That afternoon, Emily decided to investigate. She needed answers. Who had left the gold, why it had been hidden, and what danger it might bring. She remembered the engravings on the bars and the note. Trust no one. Protect it. This is only the beginning. Her first stop was the local library, a small building where she hoped to research symbols, codes, and anything that might give her a clue. As she walked in, the librarian, a middle-aged white woman, gave her a wary look. "Can I help you?" the librarian asked, her voice polite but cold. There was a subtle edge to her tone, a hint of skepticism about Emily's presence. "I'm looking for books on ancient codes and symbols," Emily said, holding her chin high. She had learned long ago to mask her irritation, to not let bias shake her focus. The librarian hesitated, her eyes scanning Emily briefly before nodding. "Aisle 3, she said curtly, returning to her paperwork. The quiet tension reminded Emily that bias was never far from the surface, even in places she had thought neutral. Hours passed as Emily pored over old texts, deciphering patterns, comparing symbols, and sketching potential connections. She could feel the weight of the gold at home, the black key burning a metaphorical hole in her pocket. Even as she worked, she knew that the danger wasn't just academic. Shadows moved outside the library windows, eyes that had been watching since the car appeared. Emily wasn't safe, not yet, and perhaps not ever until she uncovered the truth. Returning home that evening, she found Martha waiting. The woman's smile was false, a thin veil over her desire to control the situation. "So, have you figured anything out yet?" Martha asked, her voice smooth but probing. "Maybe it's better if we, share it. You shouldn't be burdened alone." Emily didn't answer immediately. She studied Martha's face, the subtle greed in her eyes, the tension in her posture. She knew that if Martha acted now, she could try to seize the gold, or worse, betray Emily to those already circling. I'm going to figure out who left it, Emily said finally, her voice steady. And I won't let anyone, no one, take it from me or use it for their gain. Martha's smile faltered. Emily, think carefully. Sometimes being cautious isn't enough. People will do anything for wealth. You may not be ready for what's coming. Emily's jaw tightened. She understood the truth in Martha's words, and yet she also knew she couldn't back down. That night, she stayed awake, examining the black key and the engravings once more. Shadows stretched across her room, long and oppressive, and she thought again of the men in the neighborhood, of Karen Whitmore, of the subtle prejudices that had followed her all her life. The gold, while a blessing, had become a lightning rod for the world's hostility. She realized that her battle wasn't just about the gold. It was about navigating a world that had always underestimated her, that had always judged her because of her skin color, her age, her position in the neighborhood. Now, with wealth and a mystery in her hands, she was no longer invisible, and that came with risk. Suddenly, a knock at her window startled her. She froze, heart racing. No one was there. Only the rustling of leaves in the night wind. But Emily knew better than to ignore it. Someone had been watching her, waiting for a moment of weakness. Over the next few days, Emily became aware of a pattern. People who had once ignored her were suddenly overly attentive. Neighbors offered casual assistance, their smiles tight and calculating. Whispers followed her at every turn, subtle threats hidden in polite conversation. The world seemed to have shifted overnight, and Emily could feel the pressure mounting. At home, Martha's restlessness grew. She hovered around the kitchen, peering into Emily's room when she thought no one was watching. Her ambition was a slow-burning fire, threatening to explode. Emily sensed the danger in her stepmother's intentions, but she also knew that confronting Martha directly could escalate into open conflict, and she wasn't ready for that just yet. One evening, Emily received a phone call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was smooth, almost comforting, but there was a subtle edge of menace. "Emily Johnson," the voice said, "I know what you found, and I know what it means. Be careful who you trust." The line went dead. Emily's pulse quickened. Whoever had left the gold had eyes everywhere, and they weren't just watching for curiosity. They were watching for weakness. Emily sat in the dark, the gold and the black key before her, realizing that every move she made would be scrutinized. Every person she encountered could be an enemy. The prejudice, the greed, the envy, it all compounded the danger. Racism and bias weren't just social barriers anymore. They were weapons, wielded by those who thought they could intimidate or control her. Yet in the midst of fear, Emily felt a spark of determination. She had faced bias all her life and had survived. She had learned to navigate a world that constantly underestimated her. And now, with the gold as both shield and target, she would need every ounce of cunning, courage, and strength she possessed. The abandoned car, the gold, the mysterious notes, they were no longer simply curiosities. They were the start of a battle, one where Emily would face the combined forces of greed, prejudice, and unseen threats. She understood that from this moment onward, there was no turning back, and Emily Johnson, brown-skinned, sharp-eyed, and resolute, was ready to fight. Emily Johnson, 24, tall, sharp-eyed, with warm brown skin and chestnut hair that fell in waves around her shoulders, had faced prejudice all her life. Teachers had underestimated her, neighbors had whispered assumptions, and coworkers had dismissed her intelligence. Yet nothing she had experienced compared to the weight of the gold she now possessed. The discovery of the abandoned car, the ornate box, The bars of gold and the black key had thrown her into a world she didn't fully understand. A world fraught with greed, danger, and the subtle, corrosive power of racism. Her stepmother, Martha Collins, 45, pale-skinned, icy blue eyes, and a meticulously controlled demeanor, had grown restless and increasingly unpredictable since the discovery of the gold. Her ambition, previously simmering under a polite mask, now festered openly, a mix of envy, fear, and greed. Emily had long learned to read Martha's moods, the flicker of her eyes, the tightness in her jaw, the way the morning sunlight poured through Emily's window as she examined the gold bars again, tracing the strange symbols engraved on them. Each marking was precise, deliberate, and foreign. Yet they seemed to hum with a warning, as if they were alive and aware of her scrutiny. The black key lay beside the stack, heavy in her palm, a talisman of unknown purpose. Emily knew the gold was a beacon. She could feel eyes on her, though none were in the room. Whispers, judgmental glances, subtle assumptions, it all pressed down on her like a weight she could not shake. This was more than greed. This was a society willing to undermine her at every turn, now emboldened by the presence of wealth. Racism was subtle yet lethal, shaping the way people saw her, doubting her, dismissing her capability, even as she held what many would kill for. Downstairs, Martha paced the living room. Her icy blue eyes flickered toward the gold multiple times, each glance a mix of envy and calculation. "If anyone found out about this," she muttered under her breath, "we could be wealthy beyond imagination, but Emily mustn't know I'm thinking this." Emily sensed her stepmother's presence more than heard it. The tension was suffocating. She had faced bias in the world outside, the judgmental neighbor Karen Whitmore, whispers from men in the street. But inside the home, the threat was personal, intimate. Martha's ambition was dangerous, and Emily knew that underestimating it could cost her everything. That afternoon, Emily resolved to investigate further. She needed answers. The symbols on the gold bars had to mean something, and someone must know their origin. She dressed carefully, ensuring she carried only what she needed: the black key, her sketches of the symbols, and a notebook filled with her deductions. Walking through the neighborhood, Emily felt the usual tension, amplified by the knowledge of her discovery. The men from across the street leaned against a fence, watching her. Their whispered commentary carried the familiar sting of prejudice, their words dripping with doubt and envy. "Look at her. Thinks she can handle all this. She doesn't know what she's doing." Emily clenched her fists, forcing herself not to respond. She had learned to endure these judgments all her life. But now, with the goal in her possession, she knew their assumptions could turn dangerous. Greed, envy, and bias were a volatile combination, and she was at the center of it. Her first stop was the local library, a place of relative neutrality. But neutrality was a fragile illusion. The librarian, a white woman named Sylvia, gave Emily a wary glance as she entered. "Can I help you?" she asked, polite but cold. Emily recognized the subtle skepticism in her tone, a quiet assumption that Emily might not be capable of research at the level she intended. "I'm looking for references on ancient symbols and coded scripts," Emily said, her voice steady. She had learned to mask irritation, to not let bias shake her focus. Sylvia gestured toward the far aisle. "Aisle 3, she said curtly, returning to her work. The coldness in her tone reminded Emily that prejudice could be silent, disguised as politeness, yet still undermined her. Hours passed as Emily pored over old texts, She compared the symbols on the gold to historical records, jotting notes and sketching diagrams. Each discovery revealed more questions than answers. The engraving seemed part of a map, hinting at a much larger treasure, or perhaps something even more dangerous. While Emily worked, she noticed a figure watching her from the library doorway. Dr. Harold Finch, 57, a pale-skinned expert in ancient symbols, stepped forward. He adjusted his glasses and gave her a measured, slightly skeptical look. "You're quite young to be studying these patterns," he said carefully, his tone polite but edged with doubt. The subtle bias was unmistakable. He questioned her capability because of her age and implicitly her appearance. "I'm capable," Emily said firmly, meeting his gaze. "I've studied this carefully. I need to know what these symbols mean." Harold nodded slowly and gestured to a table. "All right, let's see what you've got." Together they deciphered parts of the inscriptions. Emily realized that the symbols formed a path, a map, hidden in plain sight, pointing towards something larger than the gold itself. But each revelation carried risk. Someone was already tracking her, and she could feel it. The shadows weren't just metaphorical, they were real. Returning home that evening, Emily found Martha in the living room, feigning casual concern. "Have you discovered anything?" Martha asked, her voice smooth yet probing. "Maybe it's better if we share the responsibility. It's dangerous to do this alone." Emily's jaw tightened. She studied her stepmother carefully. "I cannot trust you," she said. "Not yet, not until I know who left it and what it's for." Martha's eyes flashed with anger. "You think you're better than me? You think just because you found it, you own it all?" "Yes," Emily said firmly. "Because I have the courage to protect it. You don't." The argument left the house heavy with hostility. Shadows of greed, envy, and bias pressed in from every direction. Emily knew Martha was a threat, as much as any outsider. The next morning brought new danger. Emily had received an anonymous phone call the night before. The voice on the other end smooth but menacing. "Emily Johnson, I know what you found. Be careful who you trust. Shadows are closer than they appear." Emily's pulse quickened. She knew she was being watched. Every move, every decision was now under scrutiny. Prejudice, greed, and envy were weapons aimed at her. Each whisper and subtle judgment a dagger poised to strike. Over the following days, Emily noticed patterns forming. Books she needed were missing from the library. References were altered. Even Dr. Finch's tone shifted from supportive to questioning, doubting her interpretations more harshly with every meeting. She realized she could trust no one completely, not even the people she had sought for guidance. Martha's ambition reached a dangerous peak. One evening, she confronted Emily in the kitchen, her face pale, but eyes hard. "Emily, you don't understand," Martha said sharply. "We could control this wealth together. Just give me a share. I won't tell anyone. Think of what we could do." Emily stared at her stepmother, betrayal etched in every word. "No, Martha, I cannot trust you. Not now, not ever." The argument escalated, Martha's voice rising, the blue in her eyes bright with fury. "You think you're better than me? You think just because you found it, you're in charge?" "Yes," Emily said steadily, "because I have the courage and the will to protect it." The confrontation left the house charged with tension. Shadows of greed, envy, and prejudice hung thick. Emily realized Martha's ambition could tip into outright betrayal at any moment. That night, Emily was jolted awake by a loud crash downstairs. Heart racing, she crept down the staircase, the black key in her hand. The front door had been forced open. Figures moved outside. whispers carried by the night wind. The men from the neighborhood had returned. Their envy and bias had escalated into direct action. Emily's mind raced. She grabbed the gold and retreated to the back of the house. Martha appeared behind her, terrified for the first time. "Emily, what do we do?" Martha whispered, the earlier arrogance gone. "We survive," Emily said firmly. "Together for now. Then we deal with everything else." Outside, shadows moved in the dark, eyes glinting, waiting for an opportunity. The gold was no longer a secret. It was a battleground. Racism, greed, and ambition converged, each one a threat to her safety. As Emily held the black key tightly, she realized the truth. The gold was not just a treasure. It was a test, revealing the true nature of those around her. It showed the prejudice lurking beneath polite smiles, the greed that could turn family into foes, and the danger that waited in every corner of her world. Emily Johnson, brown-skinned, sharp-eyed, and determined, knew one thing with clarity. She would survive. She would protect the gold, and she would navigate the treacherous path ahead. The abandoned car, the notes, the black key, they were only the beginning. The night was heavy with tension. Emily Johnson, 24, tall and athletic, with chestnut hair cascading over her shoulders and warm brown skin, crouched by the reinforced back door of her house. The abandoned car and black key had already been part of her life for weeks, pulling her deeper into a dangerous, unpredictable world. Now, the stakes were higher than ever. Shadows of greed, bias, and violent intent pressed in from every side. Emily's pulse pounded as she scanned the dimly lit street. Two figures loitered near the edge of the property, their movements slow, calculating. Their whispers carried across the night air, sharp and cruel. "She thinks she can keep it all. She won't last long." Emily's chest tightened. These weren't mere observers. These were predators, emboldened by societal prejudice and greed, assuming she could be intimidated or outmaneuvered. They were wrong. Inside, Martha Collins, 45, pale-skinned, icy blue eyes wide with fear, watched from the living room. Her steps had grown hesitant, her once commanding presence replaced by nervous calculation. Emily knew Martha's ambition had shifted, from threat to tentative alliance, but trust remained fragile. "Emily, what do we do?" Martha whispered, her voice trembling. Emily's brown eyes met hers, firm, resolute. "We survive. Together, for now. Then we take control." Emily moved silently through the house, carrying the black key and a small backpack containing sketches of the gold symbols. Her brown eyes flicked toward the gold hidden beneath blankets in the reinforced floorboards. Every shadow outside felt alive with intent. Every step was a challenge in calculation and stealth. She slipped out the back door and moved toward a pre-planned exit. The intruder's footsteps echoed faintly in the night, punctuated by whispers thick with racial prejudice and entitlement. "She's just a girl. What can she do?" The comment struck Emily not as insult, but as a challenge. She had spent her entire life underestimated. Teachers, neighbors, colleagues, strangers, always assuming she was incapable, naive, or weak. Every microaggression, every whispered doubt had sharpened her mind, refined her instincts, and hardened her resolve. Now, these assumptions would be her advantage. Using the shadows, Emily led the intruders into a narrow alleyway she had scouted earlier. The confined space gave her a tactical edge. When the first man lunged, she sidestepped and tripped him with precise timing, sending him sprawling into the cold alley wall. The second man advanced, his sneer laced with disbelief, underestimating her reflexes and determination. Emily struck with agility and strategy, forcing both to retreat into the darkness. Her heart raced, but she remained steady. Survival was always a mixture of wits and courage, and she had learned to combine both. Back inside, Martha waited anxiously. Emily moved swiftly to the hidden compartment and secured the gold in a reinforced case she had prepared in advance. "You handled that remarkably well," Martha said, her voice shaking but tinged with admiration. "I had to," Emily said, her voice firm. "You stayed safe. That's your part." In the coming days, Emily knew she needed allies. The world was full of people who judged her by her skin color, her age, and her assumed inexperience. But she also knew there were those who could recognize talent and intellect. Her first call was to Victor Reyes, 43, a well-respected antiquities expert of mixed heritage. Victor had already helped Emily decipher parts of the gold symbols, and she needed him to fully unlock the treasure's secrets. When they met at his downtown office, Emily could sense his careful calculation, his respect laced with caution. "You've managed remarkably," Victor said, glancing at her notes and sketches. "Few could survive this long, with both the gold and their life intact." Emily smiled faintly. "Survival isn't about luck. It's about anticipating greed, bias, and human weakness. You can't fight it if you don't understand it." Together, they analyzed the map hidden in the engravings. It led to a forgotten chamber beneath an abandoned. The building loomed like a ghost from a forgotten era. Its crumbling walls and broken windows made it seem abandoned. But Emily knew better. Danger could come from anywhere: intruders, neighbors motivated by greed, or even law enforcement swayed by prejudice and assumption. Inside, dust hung thick in the air. Each step echoed ominously. Emily moved carefully, using the knowledge she had gained from her research and observations. Victor followed, his expertise guiding their progress. Martha trailed hesitantly behind, still unsure of her own place in this dangerous game. The symbols led them to a hidden passage concealed beneath a loose floorboard. Emily inserted the black key into a mechanism disguised as part of the wall. It clicked, and a hidden door slowly creaked open, revealing a vault bathed in golden light. Inside, stacks of gold gleamed alongside historical documents, artifacts, and maps detailing secret trade routes and financial legacies spanning decades. Emily realized that the treasure was not merely wealth. It was history, cultural memory, and proof of resilience. Victor whispered, "This is incredible. Whoever left this, they weren't just hiding gold. They were preserving legacy." Emily nodded, her brown eyes scanning the room. "And now we have the responsibility to protect it." As they cataloged the treasure, footsteps echoed outside the vault. Emily stiffened. The intruders had tracked them again, emboldened by greed and racial bias. They had assumed she would fail, assumed that her youth and appearance made her an easy target. Emily gestured to Victor and Martha. "Stay hidden. I'll handle this." She moved silently through the passageways, observing the intruders. There were 3 this time, armed and confident, fueled by assumptions that underestimated her. ... "She can't possibly defend all of this. She's just a girl," one sneered, echoing the same prejudice Emily had faced her entire life. Just a girl? Emily thought. She had survived whispers, sneers, and dismissals for 24 years. She would not fail now. Using her knowledge of the building structure, she set traps and distractions, causing the intruders to stumble into one another. She used the shadows to her advantage, moving silently and striking decisively. Within minutes, the intruders were immobilized and trapped, forced to retreat through the building's back exit. Emily's brown eyes blazed with resolve. She had faced bias and greed in multiple forms: neighbors, colleagues, even her stepmother. Every moment of underestimation had prepared her for this confrontation. After the intruders fled, Emily returned to the vault with Martha. The tension between them had evolved. Where there had once been fear, betrayal, and greed, there was now a cautious respect. Martha had seen Emily's courage firsthand. You truly are remarkable," Martha said quietly, pale blue eyes reflecting the gold's glow. Emily studied her stepmother. "We all have choices," she said. "You can be part of the solution or let greed control you. It's your decision." Martha nodded slowly. I want to help. I've been blind to my own ambition. I see now what really matters." Emily allowed a small smile. The tension between them had shifted from rivalry to cautious partnership. Together, they began cataloging the treasure and securing it. Even as the gold was secured, Emily knew that societal bias would persist. Neighbors whispered judgments, newspapers assumed incompetence, and strangers doubted her capability, all because of her skin color, her youth, and her gender. But Emily had learned to navigate this world. She had faced prejudice all her life, and she had emerged stronger. She organized meetings with experts, historians, and community leaders to preserve the treasure responsibly. She proved her capability not by confrontation alone, but through intellect, strategy, and courage. One evening, as she reviewed the documents in the vault, Victor said, "You've shown something remarkable here, Emily. Not just courage, but the ability to rise above assumptions, above bias, above greed." Emily nodded, her brown eyes reflecting the golden glow. "I've had to. This world doesn't give you respect. You earn it, and sometimes you have to take it." In the weeks that followed, Emily, Martha, and Victor ensured the treasure was documented and protected. Museums, historians, and legal authorities were brought in to preserve its value and historical significance. Emily realized the gold's true power was not in wealth, but in the choices it demanded, in the courage to navigate greed, betrayal, and prejudice. Racism, bias, and greed would always exist, but she had faced them and proven herself capable. Standing by the window of her home, Emily gazed at the quiet neighborhood. Shadows of whispers and judgments remained, but she was no longer intimidated. She had survived every test, protected the treasure, and gained respect from even those who had once doubted her. Emily Johnson, 24, brown-skinned, intelligent, courageous, and unyielding, had emerged as the guardian of not just gold, but history, culture, and her own destiny. The abandoned car, the black key, and the ornate box had been only the beginning. What remained was vigilance, responsibility, and the certainty that she would never allow the world's prejudice to define her. She whispered to herself, the golden light reflecting in her eyes, "I am ready for whatever comes next."